Hulu buried a Yahoo deal that would have changed everything, and the reason they killed it is something they never wanted you to know. In 2016, Yahoo was sitting on nearly $1 billion in cash from selling its core internet business to Verizon, and Marissa Mayer's team quietly floated something nobody expected: a bid to buy a real ownership stake in Hulu itself, not just a content partnership. It wasn't a press release. It was a signed term sheet, sitting in front of Disney, Fox, Comcast, and Time Warner, the four companies that actually controlled Hulu's board. And for a few weeks, Yahoo was closer to owning a piece of streaming's future than almost anyone outside those boardrooms ever knew. It would have changed everything. Not just for Yahoo, a company everyone assumed was already dead. For Hulu, for streaming, for who got to compete with Netflix in the years that followed. Yahoo had spent 2015 and 2016 trying to reinvent itself as more than a search engine nobody used anymore. Marissa Mayer, brought in from Google in 2012 to save the company, had already tried original content, tried live sports streaming, tried nearly everything. When Verizon agreed to buy Yahoo's core business for $4.83 billion that July, the leftover shell company suddenly had cash, a media division called Yahoo Finance and Yahoo Sports that pulled real traffic and no clear future. Buying into Hulu wasn't a stretch. It was survival math. Hulu needed capital to fight Netflix. Yahoo needed relevance. The pieces fit. Here's what actually happened. Multiple reports from 2016, including detailed reporting from Recode, confirmed Yahoo held real talks about acquiring a stake in Hulu. Not a token deal, but something in the range of a meaningful ownership position. Discussions serious enough that Hulu's four corporate owners had to formally consider it at the board level. This wasn't a rumor floated by a junior executive. Verizon, which was simultaneously acquiring Yahoo, was aware of the talks. The timeline lines up with mid-2016, right as the Verizon acquisition was being finalized, meaning Yahoo was negotiating its own funeral and a potential rebirth through Hulu at the exact same time. That kind of overlap almost never survives contact with corporate lawyers, and that's exactly where it started falling apart. Hulu's ownership structure was already its biggest weakness: four competing media giants who rarely agreed on anything, each one wary of letting an outsider into the room. Adding Yahoo, a company mid-acquisition, mid-identity crisis, meant adding a fifth voice with uncertain leverage and an uncertain future owner in Verizon. Time Warner was already circling its own Hulu stake increase. Disney was quietly beginning to think bigger about streaming ownership entirely. A distressed-seeming outsider buying in looked less like fresh capital and more like instability nobody needed. But that's not even the part they really buried. The real reason the Yahoo deal died wasn't Hulu's board getting cold feet about Yahoo's brand. It was Verizon. Once Verizon's acquisition of Yahoo's core business closed, Verizon inherited the remaining Yahoo entity, and Verizon had its own streaming ambitions. It didn't want to hand its newly acquired media assets or the leverage of a Hulu stake negotiated on Yahoo's terms to a joint venture where it would answer to Disney, Fox, Comcast, and Time Warner. Verizon wanted control of its own destiny in streaming, which is exactly what it later tried, and failed, to build with Go90. Absorbing a messy minority stake in a company it didn't run was the opposite of that ambition. The deal wasn't killed because Yahoo looked too weak. It was killed because Verizon looked at what it would actually gain, partial influence over a four-headed committee, versus what it would rather build alone, and chose ego and control over the shortcut sitting right in front of it. Remember that signed term sheet, the one that made Yahoo a real contender for a piece of Hulu? That's exactly where it died, buried under Verizon's own streaming ambitions before the ink even had a chance to matter. Think about what that stake would have meant. A cash infusion from Yahoo's Verizon windfall could have funded Hulu's live TV push years earlier, before YouTube TV existed to eat that market. Verizon's own subscriber base could have been bundled into Hulu directly instead of wasted on Go90, which collapsed by 2018 anyway, proving Verizon's independent bet was the wrong one all along. Streaming's entire competitive landscape, who had the capital to fight Netflix in 2017 and 2018, could have looked completely different. So Verizon chose to build alone instead of buying in when it had the chance, and Go90 died anyway 2 years later. Which leaves one question nobody at Verizon has ever really answered. What exactly did they think they'd win by walking away? And what other streaming war was decided the same way, in a boardroom you never heard about?